Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Music Done. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. I want to welcome you all to a new limited series called This Left Turn Feels Right. In this series, I'm going to be taking a look at four artists, three bands, one solo artist, who through the course of their recording career had decided to release an album in a different musical genre than what they were originally known for. And in some cases, experiencing varying degrees of success, and in other cases, according to these same artists, had to deal with the consequence of these actions. Now, I want to make something very clear. I fully support any artist that wants to record in any musical genre that they want, whether they decide to record two or three or four rock albums, and then they want to do a couple of country rock albums or even a dance album in their catalog. I fully support that. And that is 100% up to them. On the flip side of that coin, I do feel that if you're an artist that has released, say, 10 albums or more during your career, that it is unrealistic and unfair for that artist to expect their fan base to fully support and like every single album that they've released with the same intensity and same loyalty. It is not realistic. And it's quite unfair. Now, I originally was going to do this in one segment, but looking at the list, there's a lot of information to cover with each artist, or a fair amount at least. So I've decided to split this up into four segments. So in part one, we're going to be taking a look at the band Genesis. Genesis, forming in 1967, releasing their debut album From Genesis to Revelation in 1969 through Decca Records. From Genesis to Revelation came and went without a trace, due largely to the fact that when it was released, it was mistakenly placed in the gospel bin. So a lot of fans of soft rock or soft pop music didn't hear this album at all, and it did feature such songs as uh, "The Silent Sun" and "When the Sour Turns to Sweet." After being dropped from Decca Records, the album only selling 600 copies in total. The band, starting in 1970, signed to Buddha Records in the States and Charisma Records in the UK, would start to record what Tony Banks would call more typical Genesis stuff, starting in 1970 with Trespass, followed up by Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, Selling England by the Pound, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and enjoying major success in the progressive rock field. Sorry. In 1975, Peter Gabriel decided to leave the band for a solo career and also due to mounting tensions within the band. Phil Collins would take up the role of lead singer, begrudgingly so, having Genesis consist of Collins, Mike Rutherford, Steve Hackett, and Tony Banks. They would release a follow-up to The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, A Trick of the Tail in early 1976, followed up by Wind and Wuthering in late 1976. Steve Hackett would leave the band in 1977. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, A Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering still continued on in the progressive rock vein. But from when I listened to the albums, when I gathered from the albums and when I listened to them, it was more stripped down in terms of the arrangements and more linear, like A to B to C to D kind of a situation. And they were fantastic albums. A Trick of the Tail was the first album of Genesis that I really latched on to in 1990. And Phil Collins presenting himself on stage as more of a guy next door kind of situation rather than a mystical traveler from another dimension, which is how Peter Gabriel presented himself with the costumes in the early 70s. Now, up to speed here. Steve Hackett would leave the band in 1977 during the mixing of the album Seconds Out, feeling frustration over not having more of his solo material included on the albums, which left Phil Collins, Mike Rutherford, and Tony Banks to continue on as a trio, releasing the follow-up album to Wind and Wuthering, and then there were three in 1978. Now, for some people, or quite a few people, this album was a turning point for the band, moving away from the progressive rock feel to more of a pop rock area. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I can see where they're coming from. This album featured the hit single or top 40 single, radio-friendly track, Follow You, Follow Me, which was their first track that got a lot of radio airplay in the States. And according to Phil Collins, they noticed a lot more female fans in the audience. Okay. Following, and then there were three, the band released Duke in 1980, featuring the radio-friendly track Turn It On Again, one of my favorites, and also the top 10 single Misunderstanding, written by Phil Collins. Now, for me, I've always said that Duke was more of an island disc, desert island disc, one album that you would bring with you on a desert island if you had three to pick. That album for me was always one of the albums, and I still stand by that. The album was, according to Banks, a joy to record compared to the other albums. It still contained a lot of the progressive rock elements of the previous albums, with songs like Behind the Lines and Duchess and Guide Vocal, along with Duke's Travels and Duke's End, okay? The instrumental and the 2-minute piece on the end there, Duke's End. Fantastic album. After Duke came Abacab. Now, to me, this is where the band had to make a shift, a change, because if they didn't, I guess, change, you could say change with the times, they were in my opinion, danger of becoming a caricature of themselves. Okay. Now, the album produced by Hugh Padgham, their albums up to this point were produced by either John Burns or David Henshaw. Okay. They went with Hugh Padgham as a producer for this album. And in terms of the sound, it's heavy in spots, but it's more of a stripped down sound. Okay. And the drums are more prominent on this album, featuring the title track, more lengthier compositions as Abacab, Dodo Looker, uh, Keep It Dark, which was more of a pop oriented track, and the hit single, No Reply at All. Personally, for me, my favorite track is Keep It Dark. Now, after Abacab, they would follow that up with the 1983 release of the self-titled album, also known as Shapes. This is where a lot of fans started to jump ship because this was more of a pop oriented album, pop rock, but more pop, with songs like That's All and Illegal Alien. Illegal Alien, which starts up side two, pardon the pun, alienated a lot of fans. It did. Um, a lot of fans that were more akin to the progressive rock side of the band jump ship, and they could not forgive them for going to more of a pop rock vein. They continued the success of the self-titled with the release of the massively successful Invisible Touch, released in 1986. This album was their first number one album in North America, featuring 8 tracks. 6 of the tracks were released as singles, featuring such singles as title track, Tonight, 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 Land of Confusion, Into Deep. All those 4 tracks were released as singles. Side two, you had Everything She Does, or Anything She Does, sorry, and Throwing It All Away, the other 2 singles. Now, in the past, I have said that this album was a combination of the progressive rock stuff that they did in the 70s with songs like Tonight, 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 and Domino, and The Glow of the Night, and The Last Domino. But the more I listened to this album over the years, I realized that for me and for a lot of other fans out there, Invisible Touch was where Genesis went full out pop and lost a lot of fans, and as a result, never got those fans back and lost a lot of credibility with the journalists. Journalists are a dime a dozen. But with the fans, they lost their progressive rock credibility and they never got them back. Okay. As a fan of the band, I do believe that for me, their peak was Abacab. And once they hit the invisible touch phase of their career, they never were able to recover what they had previously. Not so much in terms of the chart success, but in terms of the quality of the music. They would release another album with Phil Collins in 1991 called We Can't Dance, which quite a lengthy album, 71 minutes in length, 12 tracks. But over time, that album, in my opinion, and with a lot of fans, has not stood the test of time. Yes, they toured with that album, and I saw them on that tour. But looking back on that album, it does not hold up with the material that they released in the 70s and into the 80s. Okay. So there you have it. Part one of This Left Turn Feels Right. Okay. So stay tuned for part two. Please put in the comments down below, down there, what you feel or think about Genesis in terms of did they keep their progressive rock roots all the way through their career, or did they make this left turn and did it feel right for you? Right? Again, no right or wrong opinion, no right or wrong answer, sorry, just opinions. So again, please let me know what you think in the comments down below. And click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content that got coming up. I have more shows coming up and coming up also. Part two of This Left Turn Feels Right. Bye for now.